Hi, I've never been to San Francisco alone, especially during the night. So on March 27, 2022, I decided to change that and left home around 3 p.m. Instead of driving to San Francisco, I opted for a train ride, and as I waited for the next train to arrive, this lady on a bike stopped beside a pole. It wasn't fascinating. It's just bike lady talking to a stranger about something. It was all gibberish to me because I was already looking at the preview of the photo that I've taken of her. I didn't realize the markings on the glass till I got home, but I was satisfied with the overall photo. I love the presence of the reds and the yellows in this shot. A few moments later, the southbound train arrived with the sound of a screeching metal riding along with it. I went out of the shed and pieces of plastic shards were flying everywhere. The bike lady and the stranger covered their heads as it rained sharp pieces of hard black plastic. This is where the plastic shards came from. A random shopping cart that happened to be dragged, or rather pushed, by the southbound train. This photo was taken after the train left the station. I have no idea how it was pushed to the side, but maybe it was the doing of the train operators when I and the bike lady told them about the shopping cart issue. 3 minutes later, the next train arrived. The northbound train, the train to San Francisco. I had one chance of capturing a train arriving, but I wouldn't want to freeze it in time. So I did some tinkering with my camera settings and made sure that I'll also be able to capture its motion. I got in, and inside was pretty much empty. I had the option to sit upstairs and just sit around where I'm standing. I went for right and sat at the middle row. The window beside me was frosted. It seemed to be dirty for me to see what lies beyond the window, but the window in front of me has some slight hints of reflection on it. Beside the window was a masked woman, constantly changing her shift. For a few seconds, she'll be looking outside her window. A few seconds later, she'll be looking at her phone. But at this shot, she seemed to be staring at the seat in front of her. She didn't leave the train until the last station, and wow, finally, after waiting for a total of an hour and 30 minutes, I'm finally in San Francisco. The empty hallway of the train was suddenly filled with life. All people of different races, age, sexuality, and background filled the doors that would eventually lead them to fresher air. I already lost the masked lady from earlier, but this other lady with a Hello Kitty bag was already in front of me when I took this photo. Outside the station, I didn't know where to go, so I opened Apple Maps and look for buildings that were interesting, and just my luck, I happened to be a few walks away from the Oracle Park and the Bay Bridge. As I walked for the bridge, my eyes wandered and tried to take photos of that sparks interest. The first one was this, just a plain old bench for anyone who's tired, for anyone who is waiting. I wondered how old this bench is and how many times it served its purpose. In front of it was a view that screams symmetry. Well, if you ignore the building at the top right, this would have been a better photo. I had a choice to edit the building behind out, but then I remember why I am doing street photography in the first place. I want my photos to feel real, and what makes something more real other than the blemishes surrounding the subject itself. A few yards away was the Oracle Park. This was my first time seeing its front entrance, and I was simply astonished how amazing it looks in person. I framed my shot from behind this metallic structure to give it some subframing, which turned out quite well. As I walked towards my way for the Bay Bridge, I noticed there was also a small train running alongside the middle of the road. I know I need to take a photo, in motion, of course. And so I waited and waited. I really appreciate the outcome of the shot right here, as its popping colors seem to be giving the photo a much needed excitement. And I love the red streak coming off from the train. Then something happened. A hand caught my attention, but it wasn't any other ordinary hand. It was a smoker's hand lying outside a window, 16 feet above me. I frantically took a photo of it with my non zoom camera, but the framing was all wrong. So I grabbed my zoom camera from my bag, zoomed in, and took the shot. It was easily one of my favorite photos of the day. It's clean, simple, and you can easily detect the subject. I think it really tells a lot about these buildings right here. They may be just plain, ordinary buildings, but we often forget that inside them are full of life, real people. I think the person behind that window is under stress or maybe spending some of their free time. I arrived at the Bay Bridge, and there were some interesting people that I took photos of. And I also took this. Also, one of my favorites. Everything about this photo is blue. And blue means serenity, peace, and tranquil. It can also mean the coldness, like the coldness of the weather when I took this photo. However, there's also a hint of redness in the photo, especially around the necklace the man was wearing. Like the old saying goes, a photo is worth a thousand words. What's great about street photography is that there's a lot of stories to tell by just looking at the photo itself. While the photo tells us it's blue, remember that the hint of red could also mean anger and danger. But red is also the color of passion and love. I came closer for the bridge, but I noticed that this man was sitting outside the fence. I find this photo striking because I suddenly remembered all those US history lessons from a few semesters ago. It's a photo of a black man sitting beyond the safety fence, and it somewhat looked like a black man trapped inside a cage. But also, he was looking beyond the world, a view of serenity that probably a lot of black people dream of, look for in the past, like the cages themselves. The photo looks rusted, surrounded with the color of used iron, which shows that this race problem still persists even decades after multiple civil rights movements. A few yards away from me was another blue man who I saw earlier paying for his parking. As he walked towards High Dive, he kept looking to his right. There's simply something about the San Francisco Bay that people are mesmerized about it. I see this photo as a story of an old man looking at the very same view from his childhood, memories still fresh as in front of him. Now, I had a new goal: wait till it's night and do some night photography. I opened my Apple Maps and I was on my way to SF Soma. I decided to take some photos of architecture this time, and this one was one of my favorite shots. I love the symmetry happening in this photo, and I love the subframing happening in the center. It feels like there's another city behind the current city I'm standing on. And again, I don't like seeing motion standing still. That's why I let the cars in the foreground do their thing to give a sense of life in the photo right here. I took several other architecture photos while I was walking towards SF Soma. But then suddenly, I forgot to check the weather. The weather app was the first thing that I went for, and it turns out the rain isn't going to stop until morning. My lenses aren't weatherproof, so I had no choice but to run back to the station. This was my train that led me home. I only spent an hour and a half outside till it started raining. While I wasn't able to take hundreds of photos that I was initially planning to, I did take some that I will forever cherish. I arrived home with a new profound sense of the streets of San Francisco. While my time there was short, taking photos helped me see the stories behind being told in each corner, being told by people just going by their business. Stories that aren't obvious to begin with. San Francisco, I can't wait to see your streets again and listen to the other stories you're wanting to tell.